Bruce Springsteen's Deliver Me From Nowhere. I actually did a video reviewing the book that this is based on, so you can check that video out. I was very excited about this movie, and it seems like no one else was because this movie did not do well. Shockingly. I expected this not to do like amazing. I expected this to do similar numbers to the Bob Dylan movie or something, but it just didn't. And I think a lot of that is that this movie isn't great, and I think that Timothy Chalamet is a bigger name, and Bob Dylan has a bigger audience than Bruce Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen's big, but I think he's a little more niche in a lot of regards. Um, and so I don't know. This movie kind of just came out. It didn't do great, and I think that's unfortunate. And I recommend that if you're a Bruce Springsteen fan, you do check this movie out because I am going to complain about some things and not like this movie completely, but there's also a lot of good here I really like. Let's start with the good. I think that this movie is a great version of a biopic in terms of, a lot of biopics are getting old. They're the same old formula. I really like this in the Bob Dylan movie where they're taking times in these people's lives and just throwing you into it. And that's both a minus and a negative because if you don't really know that musician and their story, you're gonna be left with some pieces that aren't great. But at the end of the day, the story of Bruce Springsteen's album of his making of Nebraska is just a really good story. I mean, that's why it was a book before it was a movie, and it's really not amazingly told here, but it's still got those pieces, those really great scenes where they're crafting the album and how they're telling the story about how the sound and the vibes they were going for, and the ideas that a lot of it was related to his childhood trauma and how he's trying to overcome that, and the way they show all that together in his struggles. The relationship stuff was really cliche and bad, but most of it worked in terms of all the other stuff, and so I think that's the really good part about this movie. Now the negative. First of all, this movie I think is really hurt by the casting of Jeremy Allen White. And I really hate to say that because I really like this actor. But he never once sounded like Bruce Springsteen. He looked like Bruce Springsteen. He had a couple moments where his mannerisms were like Bruce Springsteen. But the whole time I kept seeing Jeremy Allen White because it was his voice, it was his mannerisms, it wasn't Bruce Springsteen. And then even the moments where he does sing and stuff, it's not like the Bob Dylan one where Timothy Chalamet did a lot of that. Jeremy Allen White couldn't do that, and so it's clearly just his Bruce's actual voice dubbed in, and so it makes it even more like awkward to me because I know what Bruce Springsteen sounds like. I know the way he moves. I know. And well, now I think if you're not someone who loves Bruce Springsteen, you're super familiar with him, you're not going to be bothered by that as much. But it's still a big problem because at that point it comes down to, oh, we just cast the guy who looks like Bruce Springsteen. Well, great, but he doesn't need to just look like Bruce Springsteen. He needs to sound like him when he's talking. And I know that's difficult to do, but it almost felt like they just cast this actor because of his name and how he looked. And that's not how biopic casting works. You gotta look and sound. And if they can't sound, they have to at least capture the mannerisms. Like, Rami Malek didn't sound like Freddie Mercury, but his mannerisms were good enough that you didn't even notice. And I think this movie was hurt by that. So, yeah, I was very disappointed by this movie because of that. And I think also this movie takes about half an hour to really get going. And once it really starts cramping down on that making of that album, it's great stuff. But a lot of it was pretty slow and sluggish at points. And I think it dropped momentum in a few points in the movie that unfortunately just dragged the movie down. I would still rate this about a 6 out of 10. It's not a bad movie. I think if you're a Bruce Springsteen fan, there's a lot to get out of it. But and even if you're not, I think there's stuff to get out of it, but it's not one that's amazing. And I think that's part of the reason this movie bombed, unfortunately. But yeah, let me know your thoughts, like, share, and subscribe.